But I think it's really important to allow your kids to make mistakes.
Have you ever seen someone of that age group really turn things around?
€500 is enough to turn down the volume dramatically on the financial anxiety.
So, Eoin, you write a column for us twice a month, and we are inundated with questions for you from our readers who have financial dilemmas, problems that they are trying to solve. We got one in recently, and I thought it was quite interesting. It's a woman in her early 40s. She feels like she's made a lot of financial mistakes. She's built up a lot of debt, in particular on buy now, pay later. And she seemed to be very overwhelmed and was wondering, is it too late for her? Can she turn it around? Can she ever build a financial nest egg? So can we start by giving her a little bit of advice?
Yeah, Katie, if it wasn't for the early 40 bit, I'd think that you were talking about yourself there.
Oh.
Did you just plant that one in there? Is that what happened? Is it? No, okay, sorry, I should have went there. No, I'm only joking.
Maybe it is me.
Yeah, but look, one of the biggest things and the big standout of that question there is the buy now, pay later thing. And let's just address that for a second. 36% of people, 1 in 3 people, don't even recognise buy now, pay later as a loan. They think it's a payment facility, right? It's a loan. And the reality is, but it's only 0%. So what difference does it make? The problem with it is you could have 10, 15 of these things coming out at different times of the month because they're so easy to sign up to. And for people who don't know what they are, you buy something, you spread the payments typically over 3 payments, 0% interest, and they're really easy to set up. And you can use them for anything. Like I was on... I can't remember which one of the takeaway delivery apps. I can't remember which one it was. And if you spend more than €35, you can spread the payments of your Chinese over 3 payments on an interest free. And if you make the repayments and if the thing works, you will have no interest to pay and you will have no fees to pay and you'll have no charges. But if you've got 10 or 15 or even one of these coming out and you miss the payment, that's where you get yourself in trouble. You can end up with fees and charges. It can end up affecting your credit rating. Your credit report, it'll be recorded as a missed payment like it would be on any other loan. And these things are a big fear for me. Like I think that's the next big problem we're going to have when it comes to debt is buy now, pay later. We can see it across the board, across the water in the UK and the US. These are things, we have troubles coming down the track unless we really start to get informed about what they are and accept that they are alone. So for this person in particular, that's my rant over because that is a fear of mine, if I'm honest, right? This person, first of all, they're in their 40s, their early 40s is what they've said. So if you think about that, they have more of their life left than they've already had. So it's not too late. Like that's madness to suggest, I'm over the financial hill in my early 40s and it's pointless, just give up and just not bother with it. Of course they can fix this. Of course they can. But the first thing they need to do is accept what the problem is. So anyone who's in debt, anyone who's struggling, the first thing you need to do is get a pen and piece of paper. And I want a pen and piece of paper. I don't want an Excel spreadsheet. I don't want it complicated. I want it really simple. And something happens in our brain that when we write something down, it goes a bit deeper. And I saw a piece of research on this recently where it was a neuroscientist saying that it's all the senses being used. It's touch, it's feeling, it's sight, it's even the sound of the scribble across the page.
I love that.
Okay, so that's why it goes in much deeper and it has more impact on you. So you need to sit down and you need to establish what the problem is. You need to write down all the money that you owe, what the repayments are, when the dates of each month, what day of the month they need to come out at. And you need to do that really scary thing of taking out your phone and taking the calculator and working out how much money you owe. Because without identifying what the problem or how big the problem or maybe even how small the problem actually is and you've just blown it up in your own head, you don't know where you need to start. And my suggestion here is you write down all the loans. Ideally, you try and find out what's the interest rate on all of them. You work all that down through. And remember, people say, I couldn't do that. I couldn't write down them all. And I'd have to look at it, I'd have to actually face the problem. Writing it down doesn't change the problem. The problem is still there, right? It exists anyway. It's not getting any better or worse just because it actually might get better, but it's not getting any worse because you've written it down, okay? So what I would say is that, first of all, establish what it is. Then what you need to do is you need to say, right, how am I tackling this? What am I doing? If it's credit card debt, get rid of the credit card, right? Just get rid of it, report it lost, stolen, don't get a new one, cut it up. If you know the credit card number off the top of your head, I often do this when I'm doing corporate speaking. You'll have a couple of hundred people in the room and I'll ask the question, who in the room can tell me off the top of their head their credit card details?
What percentage of people
You
can?
get about 10 to 15% of people. If you have an honest room, you'll have about 10 to 15%. Now, these are all in work, and they're going, yeah, me. I always pick someone. I always pick on someone, and I'll say, okay. So what they know is they know the 16 digits on the front, they know the 4 digits a month and the date, they know the three digits in the back. That's 23 digits. And I would challenge anyone to tell me any other 23 digits in a row that they could tell off the top of their head. And what I would always describe that as is a toxic relationship, right? Like you are in a toxic relationship where it's madness that you can remember all those numbers just off the top of your head. So what I would say to those people is you need to get rid of the credit card, report it lost, stolen, get rid of it. Debit card as well, the same thing. But you do need to stop the problem getting worse first. That's the first. Identify the problem, then stop it getting worse. Get rid of your ability to borrow, whether that's credit cards. If it's an overdraft, you need to treat it like a loan as well. Like if you owe 500 euros in an overdraft, you need to say, right, for the next 10 months, I'm going to put 50 quid a month off that, and I'm going to create a new zero. For a lot of people, an overdraft is an interesting one because they go to minus 500, they get paid, and they get through the month, and they go back to minus 500 again. That's your zero. You need to make your zero plus 500 over time, so that when you get to the end of the month, you still have 500 euros in your account, you still have 1,000 euros in your account, or whatever the case is. So that's your new zero, and you need to reset that. But when you've identified, right, that's what my problem is, these are the interest rates, this is how much is outstanding, this is what my repayments are. What I would always encourage people to do is start to look at their spending on the other side. So you have two ways of fixing this. You're going to increase your income or reduce your expenditure, okay? But you need to identify, most people can't increase their income just like that, right? So it's more likely you're going to look at the stuff you can control, which is your expenditure. And you look at your expenditure and say, okay, where am I going with this? What am I doing? Where is there wallet leakage? What stuff am I spending money on that actually adds no value to my life? And the real key thing to that is, and I challenge anyone listening to this, for the next week, don't change your spending habits in any way. And it doesn't matter if you're in debt or not, do this. Don't change your spending habits in any way. But every time you spend money, take out your phone, cup of coffee, 360, packet of crisps, I don't know, 120, pair of jeans, 100 quid, dinner out, 60. And just write down how much it is you spent and what you spent it on. And again, a week from today, take out a pen and paper, write down all the things and figure out what you need to do is you need to put a line down the middle of the page, and on one side say conscious spending, on the other side say subconscious spending, or you can change the headings to added value to my life, didn't add value to my life. And the first coffee of the day may have added value to your life, but did the fifth or the sixth one? Like, is that just habit that you just walk by the barista and, yeah, I like that coffee, I grab one anyway, right? So try and figure out where it is that the money sits. And what you'll have at the end of that is on the heading, the subconscious spending or the didn't add value to my life, that's a list of all the things you spent money on in the last week that added no value to your life. So you strip them out, you can use that money to tackle your debt, and your lifestyle is still exactly the same as what it was. And this is just wallet leakage. That's all it is. We're spending money because we have it. And oftentimes we're spending on things without even thinking about it. We just do it because we can. And look, people would say, but you're oh yeah, but my list, how much am I going to come to? You'd be shocked how much money you spend on a week-to-week basis just because it's habit.
Yeah.
But even if it's 10 euros, 30 euros, 50 euros, that's a 50 euros extra that can go off those loan repayments to try and start to reverse the cycle that you're in. The moment you're accumulating up debt, you need to peak it off and start to bring it down whatever way you can. And what people would traditionally do is they would say, okay, list all the loans, look at the one with the most expensive interest rate first and go after that one. That financially is probably the best thing to do, but practically is the wrong thing to do, right? Because what actually happens there is the one with the most expensive interest rate might have the highest amount outstanding on it. I want you to find the lowest hanging fruit. I want you to go after the one that has the smallest loan amount. Forget about the interest rates for the moment. We're trying to fix a problem here. And go after that, tackle it with your 50 quid. Let's say you owe 300 quid on a credit card just to make it easy, right? Go after it. You're already paying the standard 25 quid or whatever you're paying. Add the 50 quid to that. Now you've got 70 quid. In 4 months' time, that loan is gone. That credit card is gone. You've just got a quick win. Do you ever clear a loan, Katie? Like, it's an amazing feeling.
Good.
It feels great. And now you're going, I'm finally getting somewhere. I'm going to keep going with this. And now the 25 I was putting off the credit card and the 50 that I had identified for my subconscious spending, now I've got 75 to go after the loan that has 1,200 quid left on it, on top of the repayment and you just snowball it on until you clear off all the debt. And it's phenomenal to see people because they get, in a positive way, get quite addicted to, oh, I got one gone. I'm going after the other one and going after the next one. And that's how you tackle the debt. You need to find somewhere in your expenditure that you can go after the debt. If it's a really, really difficult problem, that person just seems like they're on the treadmill. They're managed to make the repayments, but they're not actually totally snowed under. But if someone is snowed under, they need to talk to MABs. But before they do that, or anybody, whatever state you're in terms of whether you think it's really bad or you're just managing, you just feel like you're just not getting anywhere, the first protocol is always your mate. Your mate might be your partner, it might be your friend from school, it might be whoever it is that you grew up with, is what I mean by that. But you need to sit down with someone and say, look, this is the problem I'm having. I've looked at it on a pen and paper. I owe this much, really struggling with it. When you are in a position that you cannot see a way out of it, it's a horrible place to be. And talking to anybody, ideally a mate, they will help you to really decide, yeah, you know what, you're right, this is a difficult place to be and you need some professional help in. And the likes of MABs are superb with this stuff. Like, they will really help you. And if they're not the right people, they'll put you in touch with the right people, whether it's an insolvency practitioner or somebody else. If they're definitely the place to start after your mate. But if you're one like this person seems to be, where you're sitting there and you're going, yeah, I'm making the repayments, but I'm just not getting anywhere, find the lowest hanging fruit, go after that first. But you also then, when you've started to do this, you need to tackle the problem. First of all, financial anxiety is always in the top 3 when people are polled, right? So what's the big stress in your life? Financial anxiety, relationship problems is always in there. So it's always similar to, it's always somewhere in the top 3. And there is research from the US that shows us that €500 or $500, it's because it's US research, €500 is enough to turn down the volume dramatically on the financial anxiety.
Wow. So
if you can just get yourself to €500, like, I know I'm asking people to do a double thing here. I'm asking to pay off the loan. I'm trying to but get yourself a buffer of €500 can make a dramatic difference to your whole approach to money. Now, people think when I talk about a buffer, the ideal buffer is either 3 months or 6 months, or 3 months to 6 months salary. If I've got a couple who have a very steady income coming into the house, both have an income, both coming in, they're steady jobs, the money always comes in, set amount each month, that's probably 3 months. If I have a household with a single income, maybe a freelancer, maybe they're a builder or something, they do a big job, they get a load of money in, they do another big job, and it's 6 months before that, then you want 6 months take home pay sitting in the buffer. And people think, oh, the buffer, what's the buffer for? The buffer, people who don't have a buffer reach for the credit card when life happens. And what the buffer is there, people think, oh, but I can never touch my buffer. No, you absolutely touch your buffer. But when you dip into your buffer, the idea is that you replace it the same way you would have replace the money on the credit card.
Yeah.
The way you would, so you pay yourself back instead of paying the credit card company back. Now you're paying for your holidays, you're not paying for the banker's holidays, right? You're actually taking the money, you're taking control of it, you're borrowing from yourself, and you're putting the money back off as soon as you can. And that's the idea of a buffer. People will often use the word emergency fund. To me, that's the wrong wording, right? Or because for me, the buffer, emergency fund always sounds negative. Right? A buffer can be used for when the boiler goes, but it can always also be used because just at the last minute you say, come on, we go away for the weekend, right? Because we just need to, and it's something we want to do, and we don't have the money from cash flow this month, and it's equally important, but you pay the money back to yourself then afterwards.
Yes.
So
and I think a lot of people really don't get that, particularly at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Because they have a few quid saved away.
Yeah.
But their instinct is to get a loan out or to get a credit card because they're frightened of reducing the figure that they've got to. They might be frightened. There was hard work to get to that savings level. I have that there. But there's also an emotional attachment to that money sometimes as well. Yeah. Like, I've built that up. I've created, and sometimes emotional. It's sometimes you might think, if you listen to me enough, that I speak out of both sides of my mouth when it comes to emotion and money, because there's sometimes emotion is really useful when it comes to money, and there's sometimes it's really not useful at all, and you need to be able to identify the times when it is and when it isn't. But sometimes people are so attached to their savings that they would much prefer to take out a loan. Now think about that for a second, right? You're putting the money into the bank, they're giving you 2%, and then you're putting it in at that teller over there is taking your money off you and putting it into your savings account and giving you 1-2%. Then you're walking away from that counter and walking over to that counter over there, and you're getting a loan of money off them for 8 or 10 or 12% of your money, though. It's your money that you're borrowing. It makes absolutely no sense. And you shouldn't be afraid to use your savings for things. That's what the savings are there for. But again, you pay yourself back the same way you would others, or like a credit union or whoever it is that you're going to pay the money back. Have you ever seen someone of that age group really turn things around? So somebody who was in financial dire straits?
Yeah, I mean, you do need to get to the point where you absolutely hate your debt. Right? You absolutely, it has to be a point to really be successful at this. Like where I sit down with somebody, and we, particularly on the TV show, we'd come across people who are in financial dire straits and they're really struggling financially. And what you'd say to them, okay, the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the credit card. No, I can't do that. Right? That's a real sign that this person doesn't hate the position they're in enough to get out of it. Right? They'll probably make an effort at it. They'll probably really go at it, but it'll fall back again because they haven't got to that point of absolute hatred of the debt. Remember I talked about emotion? This is one of the emotions. Like I hate this so much that I have to do something about it and I have to change it. And that scares me sometimes because you can see you put a plan in place for somebody, you are working it through, and if they haven't bought into it enough because they're kind of like, oh, yeah, like it's grand, like yeah, I have a bit of debt, but it's grand, like I'm getting on all right. And sometimes you can shock them into it. You can show them the amount of interest that they spent in the last 10 years. You can show them different things that kind of, and you have to try and find out what the triggers are for this person to really get to the point of understanding it. Like I had a guy, it made the cut actually, it was on the telly, and he had a guy who had an overdraft. Was it an overdraft? No, it was an overdraft. He had an overdraft. And he had a problem with the bank about 5-6 years before, and he really didn't like the bank. And every month he used all of his overdraft because I'm going to use their money to punish them. Like, and I said, seriously? He says, yeah. No, I'm going to use their money now. I'm going to go into my overdraft every single month. And he had money there not to be in it. And I was like, and I said, no, that doesn't make sense. Like with the overdraft, probably, let's call it 15%. If you have €1,000 on an overdraft and it stays there for the entire year, that's 150 quid in interest. You are literally giving your banker that you are saying you don't like 150 quid a year just by staying in your overdraft every month. And his wife goes, you see, told you. but like and that was a case of they had some problems earlier on, a couple of years before, and this was his way of getting back at them. That person didn't hate debt enough. Now they were in a fine position. They were okay. They had got themselves out of it. They had done the hard work to get out of it. But that thing was in there where there wasn't enough there to just avoid debt forever. Like, I'm never getting into that debt again. Yeah. I never want to feel like that in that position again. And the fact of the matter is, one of the things buy now, pay later in particular does is it allows you to borrow from the future to pay for something today. And that's what all loans do. But buy now, pay later is very in your face with that. And my thing, and this is quite harsh, particularly kind of in and around the Christmas time, we're just through it or whatever. If you can't afford it today, you can't afford it. Full stop. Like, and there's certain things, whatever about Christmas, you don't want to be bah humbug and you want to create a special day. Nobody will remember by March what you got them for Christmas. Nobody. Like, they might remember immediately afterwards, but they don't remember within 3 months. So why put yourself under financial stress for something like that when everybody else understands? Like, and just remind yourself that the next time you're ticking the box to say, I'll go for buy now, pay later. You cannot afford it today. You cannot afford it.
What about the people who say if you can't afford to buy it twice, you can't afford it? Yeah,
and that works for certain things. I totally agree with it. And there's another way of looking at that, and this comes back to your emotional kind of attachment to savings. If you have to use more than half your savings for it, you shouldn't be buying it.
Yeah.
And that can help with the emotional attachment to the savings, which again is sometimes a positive thing, that you're kind of going, okay, here we've got this, I can't afford this twice, or it's going to use more than half my savings. That's actually a great thing to do for, let's just take the example of communion money, or a kid getting money for the first time, whether it's their birthday or something, is to try and get them to stick to that rule. You can't spend more than half of your money on it.
Yes.
Whatever that thing is that you're going to go to the toy shop and buy, you can't spend more than half your money on it. And it's a really good discipline to get kids into. But you know what? We're all kids. So we should all be doing it for ourselves as well as adults, because the best lessons financial are the ones that kids absorb really quickly. And what I would say is if you don't have a kid, borrow a kid from a brother or a sister, talk to your niece or nephew. But if you're struggling to understand something financially, talk to a 7-year-old about it. And say, look, this is even down to simple things like, how does an ATM work? I don't mean the mechanics of it. I mean, you put your money in and then you can take it out there and they charge you for taking your money out. But it's your money. Why do you? And they're the type of questions the kids ask. And you've got some savings there, and then you can get a loan. What's a loan? And you'd be shocked how clued in and how quickly kids will get it.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot from teaching them about it.
Yeah. Were you good with money when you were a kid?
Like I was always incredibly interested in business. Like I was incredibly interested in just the workings of it and how different things functioned. And I did have I was the youngest of 4 boys, and my 3 older brothers, then my next one up to me was 5 years older than me. So, and they were all kind of a similar age, and I was kind of the little kid who was watching everything that was going on with them, and I was fascinated by some of the things they did and watching them going out and getting their first job and those type of things, and even the different personalities amongst the 3 of them. I got to learn a lot from them.
Yeah.
My dad was quite work driven. He had a really good work ethic. He did give up work when he was 50 due to illness. But my mother, so I would have got a lot of business acumen from him, even though he was actually a civil servant. But he had a great job, actually, like, because we're in here, people who don't know, we're in an independent house here at the moment, and we're on Talbot Street, right in the city centre. And Dad's job was, he took government funding and allocated it to projects that benefited inner city kids.
Okay.
Right. So there was a huge business acumen to it, and how do you best use the money? And he would have we've had lots of conversations about, and if they get the money, this is what they're going to do with it, and this is the benefit. And I'm sure he was bouncing stuff off me, like I'm saying people should bounce off the 7-year-olds when they're talking about money. And then on the other side of it, though, my mother was originally a midwife, and then she stopped working when she had the boys, we had us, and then she went back to work, but she went back to work as a therapist.
Okay.
So a family therapist. And so you kind of had, growing up, you kind of had the business acumen on one side, and then you had the kind of counsellor type thing on the other side. And I like to think that any empathy I have has come from my mother's side, and any business acumen I have came from my dad's side. And then just observing the other things that were going on around the house the whole time.
Yeah. So did you start saving from a young age?
I would say, I don't think I could do this job if I was perfect, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I totally understand why when things aren't going right, they are difficult, and when things are going well, you need to savor that, and you need to enjoy that, and you need to try and make sure that you're protecting it for the future. I would say that I've had really hard times. Like, I've had really hard times, even in business. Like, my business is 15 years old now. Sorry, it's not even, it's 2008, so it's 17 years old now. And like, there were times at the start of the business where I would have people working for me, and I went without wages for myself to make sure that they were paid.
Yeah.
And that's like every business owner, I would imagine. There's very few business owners out there who have set up by themselves that haven't had months like that.
No one talks about it, though.
Yeah,
and yet it's so common.
It's really common, and it is, and it's a difficult thing to. It's like, I think in the States it's much better, right? Like, it's win or learn in the States. It's not win or lose. It's win or. And if you have a business and the business fails in the States, someone comes along, pats you on the back, and says, "Imagine how much you learned from that."
Yes.
And imagine how much better you're going to do it the next time, and you're never going to fall for that again, are you? Or do you know what I mean? Fall for that sounds like it's there, but it's a case of, here's an ability to learn something so that you get up and go again, and you go stronger next time. Whereas in Ireland, if you fail, it's kind of like, oh, don't talk to him about that. Jesus, he wouldn't want to talk about that, would he?
Yes.
And if you succeed, it's all, I wonder who he knows. Like, do you know what I mean? So we are just like, we are our own worst enemy in terms of the successes and failures of business. And oftentimes businesses don't succeed. When they don't succeed, it's actually nothing to do with the individual running the business. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's more circumstantial. But no, to answer your question, was I good at money? I was good with money growing up, but I wasn't perfect. Far from it. And I think they're the lessons that you learn. And I think that's really important. I know we've touched on kids already, but I think it's really important to allow your kids to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And even young adults to make mistakes. When you make a mistake as a 19-year-old, you've got plenty of runway to recover. And I would often say that to students when I'm talking to 5th and 6th years. There's no financial mistake that you have made so far that's going to be carried for you through the rest of your life. And the time to make the mistakes is now. Even if we're talking about a 7-year-old using their birthday money or their communion money or whatever it is, let them blow it and don't fix it for them. Let them make that mistake where they go, kind of come back from the shop and say, I really don't like that toy. I shouldn't have bothered buying it. Why did I buy it? Let them have that remorse, because it's much better doing it with a 50 quid toy than it is a 500,000 euro house in their 30s.
Yes. So to tie things up and to tap into this win or learn idea for this woman who feels she's made a lot of financial mistakes, what's the learning curve here if she can do everything that you
so the learning curve for her is she needs to get herself in a position that she gets a quick win very quickly.
Yeah.
The sooner she can get a quick win, the better. The sooner she can get a handle on the actual size of the problem, the better. The sooner she starts to track her spending for a week and see where she's at and see where she can identify something to just go towards this problem, the better. Like, this is just about taking action and taking control of whatever you can control, and really just saying, I'm going to stick my head down here. I'm going to get this done. I'm not adding to the problem. I hate this debt. I'm not borrowing anything else. I'm just going to put my head down, get this out. And when I get out of this, I'm never going back into it again.
Fantastic. Eoin McGee, thank you so much.
Thank you.